So project 3 is to build the Oregon Trail game in Python. So before I even get started explaining it, for those who've never played the Oregon Trail, definitely go online, find a copy of it somewhere, and play it so you have an idea of what the game is like. The Oregon Trail was like this old educational game that taught you about the early pioneers to the west and simulated a trip to um, Oregon, and you would essentially have to fill a wagon full of your family and make this trip. You would have to make it in a certain number of days, and you had various factors that could control the way that you traveled. So you had a certain amount of food that would feed your family. You would have to go hunting to get more food. You had health. People could get sick on the journey. The speed of your wagon could be controlled by how many ox you had. There's different things like weather, rivers you had to cross. Bandits would come and steal stuff out of your wagon. So the whole idea was to survive long enough to make it to Oregon with all these things working against you. And it was a fun little computer game. So anyway, we're going to build a very similar version or an easier version of this game with some much simpler rules. So the idea of the game is that we want to travel from New York City to Oregon, which is 2,000 miles, and you need to do it before the end of the year. And every day that goes by is going to use up food. Some days are going to use up your health. You can hunt and rest to regain food and health, but you have to make the trip before winter. So you have to make sure you keep moving. So this is the way that our game's going to work. We're going to start in New York City, meaning we're going to have 2,000 miles to make it to Oregon. And we're going to start on March the 1st. You get to start off with 500 pounds of food, and you get 5 health. And we have to make it to Oregon by December 31st. And we're going to have basically just 3 moves in this game: travel, rest, and hunt. So what we're going to do is we're going to have every day that goes by, the person is going to lose 5 pounds of food. And twice a month, randomly, the player's health is going to go down by 1. And the moves are thus: travel is going to move you 30 or 60 miles closer to Oregon and will take you a random number of days between 3 and 7. Rest will increase your health by 1, and it will take 2 to 5 days, again, random. Hunting will add 100 pounds of food, and again, 2 to 5 days, random. And then we'll just have some helper commands. Status will list the status of your food, your health, the distance that you've traveled, and the current day. Help will list the various commands. Quit will end the game early. And the important thing is that all of these need to be functions. So they need to be functions with definitions. That's basically about it. And the easiest way to set this up, I think, is that we're going to use some global variables to keep track of the following things: the player's health, the amount of food they have, the miles left to go, the current day, and the current month. We'll build a function called addDay, which just adds 1 day to the calendar and subtracts 5 pounds of food, and if necessary, drops the player's health if it's one of those random days. We do need to be careful because some months have more than 30 days. So as we use addDay to keep track of the days and months, we'll need to keep in mind that some months have 31 days. And then the last thing is that we'll have a function which can then help us select one of these moves, and then one of those moves will call the function addDay accordingly, depending on how many days need to go by. And as we start to code this, all of this will make sense. We'll start off with the basics with our variable. We'll make 1 day go by at a time, and then we'll build out the rest of the functions to make these moves. So I think for the most part, that can get us started. So the first thing we want to do is we just want to build out some variables. So you can go ahead and open up a Python editor. And before we even get started, I'm just going to import random, because we know we're going to be using the random library for things like determining the number of days that go by when we hunt or when we rest, etc. And then from there, we're just going to go ahead and make a whole bunch of variables to help us keep track of our game. So the first thing is we're just going to make a variable called game over and set it to false. And this is going to be one of the variables we use to keep our loop running, our game loop, until the game is over. And we're actually going to probably code this one last. Other variables we're going to need is something to track the player's health. So we make a variable called player health. And remember, you start off with 5 health. We'll need a variable to track the amount of food you have. So we can call that player food. And you start off with 500 pounds of food. We make another variable called miles to go. It's going to keep track of how many miles we have left to go on the trail. We start off 2,000 miles away from our destination. And then we're going to build a calendar using 2 variables. So one variable called current day, we'll set that equal to the first, and one variable called current month, and we'll set that equal to March, which is the 3rd month of the year. 2 more variables that we're going to make right off the bat. We're going to make a variable called months with 31 days, and we're going to set that equal to a list of all the months that have 31 days. So March, May, etc., 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 December. And that way we can use this list here just to know when we are in a month that has 31 days. So for example, 3 is in this list, so we know 3 is a month. March is a month with 31 days. And we're going to make a variable called health decreases, and we're going to set this equal to a list. In our actual game, we're going to set this to an empty list and fill it with 2 random days between 1 and 30, and these will be the 2 days that our health goes down. I'm actually going to put 2 numbers in here to start off with just to help us code. So I'm going to pick the 2nd and the 7th. These are just the 2 days that I'm going to have the health go by. But when we actually code the game, we want these to be 2 random days that your health goes by. And so we're just going to start off by writing the function that's going to make 1 day go by at a time. So we're going to call this function add day. And this function is going to be pretty much the basis of our game. So anytime we make a move, whether it's travel, whether it's sleep, or what do they call it, rest, or whether it's hunt, those are going to take days to do. A random number of days, maybe between like say 3 and 7, right? So every time we get the random number of days, let's say it took us 5 days to hunt, we're going to need to run this function add day 5 times to add 5 days to the calendar. So the first thing we're going to need is we need to pull all these variables that we're going to use in our function add day. We're going to need to pull them in as global variables. So just using the global keyword, we can pull in all of these global variables. So we need current day. We'll need current month. We'll also need that list that tells us if there are 31 days, so months, 31 days. We also need to know if it's a day that our health should decrease, so we'll need the list health decreases. Also, every day that goes by, we're going to lose food, so we'll need the variable player food. And some days our health goes down, so we're also going to need to be able to change that variable. So we're going to pull in player health. And so now that we have all our global variables, we can go ahead and start coding our function. So the first thing in our function is we need the days to go up 1 at a time. Now, making the days go up is a little bit tricky because the important thing to know is that if we get to day 30 or 31, depending on what month it is, we need to then roll over to the next month. So the first thing we want to do is before we even start trying to add days, we need to see if it's a month with 31 days or a month with 30 days. We can do that with a really easy if statement. So we can write if current month is in the list months 31 days. and then I'm actually just going to fill this in with pass and write the else, and then write the pass as well. So if the current month is in months with 31 days. So we're going to start off by coding, well, what happens when we're in a month with 31 days? Well, pretty simple. If the current day does not equal 31, then all we need to do to change the day is add 1 to the current day. So if a day goes by, say if it's March 1st, 3-1, the next day would just be 3-2. So as long as it's not the 31st, to add a day, we just add a day. So we could do current day equals current day plus 1. But what happens if it is the 30th? So if the current day is not 31, then we do this. If it is 31, then we have to do something different. So if it gets to the 31st, the next day should be the next day of the next month. So for example, if it was the 31st of March, the next day would be 4-1. So how do we do that? Pretty simple. What we're going to do is we'll set the current day back to 1, and then the current month should just increase by 1. So current month equals current month plus 1. All right. So that's all the code for if it is a month with 31 days. Now, if it's not a month with 31 days, that just means it's a month with 30 days. So all this code is exactly the same. The only thing we need to change is if the current day is not the 30th, then we just add 1. If it is the 30th, we roll over to the next month. So right there off the bat, this function will add days. We could hopefully even test it out by calling add day. Let's see if it works. Oops, we actually won't know if it works unless we print out current day. So let's print out current day. We'll see what day it is. It's the 2nd. Now let's add a day and print out current day. And we should see that it's now the 3rd. So this works. Perfect. So once we have the days adding up, the next thing to do is every day that goes by, the player's food needs to decrease by 5. Well, this is easy. So what we're going to do is just right here in the function, make sure you're indented correctly. So not inside any of those if statements. We're just going to do player food equals player food minus 5. And that will cause you to lose 5 food. A couple of things we could add to this function just to make it work a little bit better is we could print out some information. So we might want to print out, say this, we could print out the current date every time a day goes by. So we might print out something like this, print date, let's do this. Actually, let's do it like this. If we do current month, comma, dash in quotes, current day, this should print out just like an actual date. It'll print out 3-1 in front of the line date. So that should be cool. And then we can also print out how much food is left. So let's print out food left, colon, and then we could just print out how much food is left. So we'll print out player food. All right, and that actually is pretty cool. So that should now do this. If we just call add day, every time we call add day, we should add a day and print out that information. So we call add day again. We can see that the days are going up and our food is going down. So that works out really, really well. The last thing we have to do is remember we said there is a chance that twice a month your health goes down. The days that your health is going to go down is randomly picked, and we save those days in this list here, health decreases. And remember, we already populated it with 2 days, but when we actually finish our game, these will be random numbers of the month. So what happens if it's one of those days? We need your health to go down. So we could do this again with just a simple if statement. We could go if current day is in health decreases, then we just need your health to go down. So we could just do player health equals player health minus 1. And that will bring our health down. We might want to print something out to let the person know that their health has gone down. So we can print something like, maybe we say, you've been on the trail for a while. You lose 1 health. Maybe you should rest soon. And then we can print out their health. So maybe we print out health. And then we can print out player health. And so that should wrap up our function add day. We can again test this out by just calling add day and seeing what happens. So if we call add day, you can see it right there. It's the 2nd, so we've lost 5 food, and we lost a health, and we keep calling add day. And when I hit the 7th, I should lose some health again, which I do. So perfect. So that's our add day function. That is done. And that's going to be the basis for pretty much the rest of our game. That's going to progress the date. That's going to bring our food down. That's going to bring our health down. So all our other functions are just going to be based on this function add day, or at least it's going to use this function add day to drive the game forward. So I'll see you in the next video.